Good afternoon and welcome to this Euractiv Hybrid Conference on Europe's Wind Power Action Plan supported by PGE. I'm Brian Maguire, lead the discussion through this afternoon. You can follow the discussion at hashtag EA Debates, and please tweet your comments using the hashtag. Our social media team will engage with you there. And to ask questions today, we're using Slido. You'll see the contact information on your screen, also in the studio here as well. The audience can send questions through Slido. We'll bring those to the panel for discussion a little later on as well. Now, during her State of the Union address, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen stressed the crucial role of the wind industry in delivering the EU Green Deal, but also remarked that the industry is facing a unique set of challenges. To address them, on the 24th of October, the European Commission announced its new Wind Power Action Plan aimed at maintaining a healthy and competitive wind energy supply chain. A supply chain with a clear and secure pipeline of projects, attracting the necessary financing and competing on a level playing field globally. The plan sets out immediate actions focused on 6 main areas: the acceleration of deployment through increased predictability and faster permitting, improved auction design, access to finance, a fair and competitive international environment, skills and industry management engagement, and member states' commitments. Will this make the wind industry a European success story? We'll see. We have a discussion panel set for you a little later on, and our keynote today, just now, will be with Dieter Jorgensen, Director General of DG Energy at the European Commission. It's my pleasure to welcome you today. Good to see you.
Thank you very much for that kind welcome. Thank you very much for having invited me here and for having organized what is an important discussion around the European Commission's wind power package, the European Wind Power Package, or the Wind Power Action Plan, and the communication on offshore renewables that is linked to that were presented towards the end of October, the 24th of October, and that I think really are critical elements in our energy transition and therefore also critical components of our work to achieve climate neutrality by 2050 and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 55 in a way that is that also ensures access to secure, affordable, and green, clean energy. And my simple message here today really is that despite the significant challenges that the wind sector is currently facing in Europe, that the wind manufacturing industry is facing, we do believe that there is a robust business case in the European Union for the wind sector, and we need to make sure that we do everything we can at European level, at national level, at local levels to make that happen and to make sure that what has been a success remains a success. We see wind and wind power as one of the key pillars of our transition towards a clean and secure and affordable energy system. By 2030, we would expect wind energy to supply more or less a third of our electricity. That's a very significant share, and again, it's a share that is necessary for us to reduce by 55% our greenhouse gas emissions. That requires us to multiply our wind generation capacity by 2.5 times over the next few years. We are already installing record numbers over these last couple of years. 22, 23 were very, very good years in renewable energy, but we need to accelerate even further and do much more and at a different pace to make that happen. Of course, the wind sector is both an energy sector, an energy provider, and part of our Green Deal, but it's also very much an industrial sector in the European Union, representing a significant number of jobs with the value chains, the supply chains being spread across the European Union. So far, the wind installations deployed in the EU have been provided mainly by European manufacturers, accounting for about 85% of the wind energy market and about 94%, so almost the entirety of the offshore sector. And we actually would like it to stay that way, and that's part of the reason for the Wind Power Action Plan. So despite this progress, as I said, we have seen that wind manufacturing in Europe has faced difficulties in operating the business. We see the largest wind turbine manufacturers having reported losses in 2022. Some of them have been doing better in the recent results, but still the situation is really challenging for the manufacturing and also for the project developers. And this is, of course, not a satisfactory solution or situation. And as I said, it is quite disaligned with the reality of significant installments and the reality of the goals and targets we have set ourselves for wind power and wind manufacturing. We have done a lot already over these last few years as part of the Green Deal and as part of our drive for competitiveness. We have put forward a Green Deal industrial plan. We have put forward a Net Zero Industrial Act, the Critical Raw Materials Act, and we have provided a more simple and more flexible state aid framework to help accelerate the green transition and the deployment of renewable energy. But we do see that despite these actions taken, we see pressure on the wind sector, and we therefore found it necessary, our President Ursula von der Leyen, as she stated in her State of the Union speech, found it necessary to come forward with a wind sector-specific action plan, which is the one that was presented on the 24th of October, together with the offshore wind plan. And let me, you've set out the main components of the action plan, so I'm not going to repeat what you said, but rather provide a few examples of what does that mean? How are we translating that into action? Because the key word here really is action. It is not a communication, it is not a strategy, it's an action plan, because we need to make things happen, to make the change that secures the European wind sector. Now, one example of what we're doing as part of the action plan is what we call the Accelerate initiative, where we in the Commission will provide support to Member States to help them implement the new permitting rules that have been agreed in the Renewable Energy Directive, and of course also the emergency permitting measures that were adopted last year. We also will work with Member States to make sure that there is much better visibility and anticipation, more certainty about the planning of what are the projects that are planned, so that investors, manufacturers, know what they are working in and can plan their manufacturing and their capacity accordingly to make best use of the resources and to make sure that we are able to deliver what is actually planned. The access to grids is a key aspect in that context. You need to make sure that if you invest in a significant wind generation capacity, that this will have access to grids and that the grids can manage those additional renewable electrons. And for that, we will be launching in just a few weeks an action plan on grids that really should be seen as a supplement, a complement to the wind action plan. We've also seen that in the field of the auctions, as they have been designed and carried out across the European Union, where things we can do better. We can be more uniform for more efficiency. It will make it easier for companies to bid, but also for governments to design the auctions. We also see that there is a tendency to focus very highly on price for good reason, but that we need to make sure we build in qualitative components as well to address some of the issues that otherwise have a negative impact for wind manufacturing. We need to make sure that we are able to address the high inflation and the high interest rates, and that we are able to design auctions in a way that take account of the delays or non-executions of projects as well. Then we have concerns, or the sector has concerns, about access to finance more generally. And here we have to make sure that where possible there is access to financial support for wind manufacturing, including European funds, but also, for example, the European Investment Bank, and that we have the de-risking instruments that can help bring global investors, financial investors and institutional investors on board in this important sector for the European economy and for the European energy transition. Of course, there is a global context to all of this, and part of the challenges in the sector is the global competition and what is not currently a level playing field in a global context. So we have to make sure that our internal market is resilient and that we make best use of our trade instruments and other instruments to build an international level playing field as well. And then a bit more long term, we know that the renewable sector, the green technology sector more generally, will require significant skills and different skills from what we have now. So we need to strengthen our skills base. We need to bring young people into educations and professions that will be needed as part of our energy transition and our climate transition. So we need to build the skills also for the wind industry in the future. So these commitments, these actions we have set out in the action plan, as I said, it really is about actions and it is about immediate action. So we are already working to implement it. We're already working with member states and with the sector and trying to bring them on board as part of a wind charter that would hopefully be adopted before the end of the year between member states, industry and ourselves in the Commission to make sure that there is real engagement and commitment among all actors. Now, I mentioned already that we, at the same time as the Wind Action Plan, announced or adopted an offshore renewables communication, following up on the earlier offshore energy communication that came out at the beginning of the mandate. Because under that first communication and under our work to plan infrastructure and plan investments, we have seen very, very significant ambitions in terms of the long-term goals for the deployment of offshore renewable energy across the European Union. The overall ambition, if you put together the commitments made in the different sea basins across the European Union, that brings us to 111 gigawatt of offshore renewable generation by the end of this decade, so by 2030. This is almost twice as much as what was hoped for in the original offshore renewable energy strategy, where we set a target of at least 60 gigawatt. So quite an interesting overshoot and a very, very positive overshooting. And of course, we have to make sure that we have the best possible framework in place to make that happen, and therefore the very, very strong link to the Wind Power Action Plan. And we need to deliver on this ambition of 111 gigawatt, and the communication together with the Wind Power Action Plan helps do that. Now, again, here there are some specific actions that we need to make sure are taken, that we make sure we are ready also when it comes specifically to offshore, because offshore will bring us the very significant capacity, really the gigawatts that are needed towards 2030. We need to strengthen offshore grids, and the grids reinforcement inland, of course, are linked to that. So what we're working on there is to prepare a specific cost-benefit analysis and cost-sharing work. And through offshore network development plans, we will increase the attractiveness of hybrid and joint projects. There are some regulatory aspects that will require clarification there, including in network codes, to make sure that there's clarity about the cost sharing and about the impact of projects. We also see that offshore projects, especially the larger offshore projects, tend to be more complex, and permitting can take even longer than in the case of onshore. With the revision of the Trans-European Networks regulation a few years ago, and with the revised Renewable Energy Directive, we have taken significant steps to shorten and simplify permitting with respect to offshore as well. And we will, as I mentioned earlier, really work more closely with member states and increase support for member states to implement the permitting provisions and to accelerate permitting. I mentioned before the planning between in the different maritime, in the different sea basins across the European Union, and they are of course working on maritime spatial planning, where we in the Commission will look for ways where we can move away from what has typically or traditionally been a national regime for plans to build a stronger cross-border consultation to give regional planning, again, to accelerate the large offshore wind projects. And then we need to continue our work on research and innovation to make sure that we have the best possible technologies, make sure that we innovate so that we can lower cost and increase efficiency also in the offshore renewable sector. We have Horizon Europe, of course, we have the updated SET plan, both of which can provide support for the dedicated offshore technologies, including floating wind, which in some parts of Europe is a necessary technology to make offshore wind a reality. And then, of course, we need to pay attention to circularity, the recycling of materials, to manufacturing and societal needs. Circularity is critical all the more in the current challenging global markets and global geopolitical context when it comes to access to material and supply chains. Another important aspect of offshore specifically is, of course, the role of ports in the green transition. And here we need to make sure that we make best use of the two frameworks we have, the Trans-European Networks and Energy and the Trans-European Networks and Transport, that those regulatory frameworks are complementary and make sure that, that we cover what needs to be covered. I already mentioned skills, and of course the Pact for Skills also in this sector is critical in this European Year of Skills, but the action on skills should not end with this year. We need to make sure that we take that forward. So with that, I have come to my conclusion and would like to say that we have historically been absolutely leaders, pioneers in the field of the development of offshore wind and the wind sector in general. I gave you the figures at the beginning of the speech, the very significant share of our own market covered by European manufacturing, but also of global markets. You see a very, very strong European presence. So we need to make sure that we maintain that strength, that we maintain that leadership, both in terms of research and innovation, in terms of technology and skills, but also in terms of manufacturing, investment and deployment of renewables, both in the European Union, but also beyond that. So thank you very much for that. And thank you again for organizing the event, which I think comes at a critical moment for the wind sector. Thank you.
Before you run off, thank you so much for a concise and very clear presentation of the overview of this. One particular question that struck me is the auction design. How do you think this new format of the auction design will help manufacturers?
Very, very good question. And I think the auction design has, it really is a central point of the plan. So in our work since the beginning of the year and over the summer to prepare the Wind Power Action Plan, it came out very, very clearly from industry, from project developers, but also from governments, that the auction design is a bit of a challenge. And I think you need to go back a bit in history, because auctions have typically been focused on price, and there's very good reason for that. We want to have the cheapest possible energy, and wind is a fairly low-cost source of energy. And so there's been that focus on price to get most for taxpayers' money, and that's a good thing. Another reason for the focus on price is, of course, it's much easier to design an auction if you design it just around price. Then you can do a very simple assessment, you've got clear criteria, so it is simpler to work with. At the same time, the focus on price really risks driving either project promoters away, or it risks favoring those manufacturers that do not have the highest possible quality, or that are not best placed at developing the type of technology that we need in Europe, or manufacturers or project developers that do not necessarily respect our security interests or take them into account, or that do not necessarily respect the sustainability requirements in our sea basins. So in other words, an auction based exclusively on price will not favor European manufacturers. It will not favor Europeans because it doesn't give us the best longer-term solutions or the best long-term projects. It will favor manufacturers from other parts of the world at a risk for our security, for our data security, for our infrastructure security, at a risk for our maritime sea environment and the sustainability. And so we actually need to make it maybe a little bit more complicated, not too much, but we need to recognize the fact that qualitative requirements differ as well. And this is already possible in the European rules, but it is not done again because it's a little bit more complicated. So what we have tried to do in the plan is to look at how can you develop the qualitative requirements? How do you integrate that into the tenders and into the auctions without making it too complicated? And one of the ways of doing it is to favor pre-qualification criteria, because you then very early, very upfront in the processes, it's clear that you have to respect the security requirements, the sustainability requirements, the quality requirements. And once you do that, then you will be assessed, obviously then primarily also on price as one of the components. One further reason for doing that is that what we have seen in recent auctions across Europe, both in the European Union and in neighboring countries, is that some of the auctions have had minimum price requirements that simply have meant that they failed. There was not enough interest in these projects. The projects were not viable. So it might have made sense from a budgetary perspective, but they simply did not work from an industry perspective, because we have seen a combination of very high inflation and high interest rates that have increased the costs of these projects. So there are very, very good reasons to strengthen the qualitative requirements in auctions. There's good reasons to do it in a way that's as simple as possible. And of course, while making sure that we don't increase the price more than necessary, but making sure that we get the best possible wind across Europe.
Perfect. Dita, thank you so much. Another round of applause for Dita. Thank you. Pleasure. Now I invite our panelists to come take their seats as well, and we'll begin our panel discussion. I think each of you have a name on the seat, so you can find your spot. Thank you. So just so our guests get settled, and I can remind you that you can send questions on Slido. You'll have the QR code and the other code on screen. Our studio audience can also send questions on Slido, and we'll bring those during the course of the discussion, not just at the end. There you go, on screen, and not just at the end. And if you want to tell us who you are and where you're from in that question as well, that would be helpful. And if you have a specific question for a specific panelist, please put that in the question too, and we'll try and address that as well. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for taking time today. Let's introduce our panelists. We have Anne Stroobant, the Deputy Head of Cabinet at the Federal Minister for Energy at the Federal Government of Belgium. Great to have you with us. We have Morten Petersen at the end here as well, Vice Chair of the ITRE Committee Committee at the European Parliament. You're leaving at 12:40, so I'm going to pile a whole load of questions towards you as in the earlier part of the discussion. We have Pierre Tardieu, the Chief Policy Officer at Wind Europe. Great to have you with us. And Georg Zachman, his Senior Fellow at Bruegel. And Wanda Book is Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at PGE as well. Thank you all for taking time to be with us. We're going to start in just 60 seconds, your elevator pitch, your key message for today as well. And I'll start with you, Anne.
Okay. So yeah, thanks for having me today. I think from my side, a very important message that I would like to bring is that we really need these anticipatory investments. Not wait for the market signals to come, but actually try and develop the full potential of offshore wind, the full potential of wind, together with the potential of grid. So we really welcome the grid initiative that will be launched by the European Commission. And this to really secure the energy of supply within a European context, not per member state, but really looking at the independency of Europe as a whole, because as member states alone, we will not necessarily walk in the same direction.
Thank you so much. Pierre.
So just to be clear, the wind power package is exactly the right set of measures at exactly the right time. Yeah? We heard from Dieter, Europe needs wind and wind needs Europe because on the one side, we've got very ambitious renewable energy objectives, which are critical to meeting our energy security and climate objectives. And that means that we need to boost and expand the wind supply chain. But on the other hand, we've got a European wind supply chain that is constrained in its ability to invest because of a perfect storm that Dieter explained very well: inflation, higher interest rates, etc. And therefore, the wind power package basically addresses these issues exactly head on in immediate, actionable ways. So now the question is, of course, the wind power package is not a magic wand. It requires, commitments being delivered on by the European Commission, national governments, and industry. But it's exactly the right route to follow going forward.
Thank you so much. Georg.
Thanks a lot for inviting us on here. My take is that wind has very special value in the energy transition. So different from other technologies, wind is blowing in winter. Wind is happening in the north. Wind is less correlated across regions, and wind is relatively fast to deliver depending on swings in the demand. So in that sense, we need to look into what does wind deliver to us and how do we maximize this value that it is delivering to us. We don't want to have more wind production when the sun is shining and the system is floating with electricity. We won't necessarily want a lot of wind in regions that have plentiful of alternative that are potentially cheaper, but we want a lot of the wind that is valuable. So go for the value of wind, not necessarily for the terawatt hours, and design your support schemes in a way that you get most of the value for consumers, and that will also enable us to get higher demand overall for electricity and will benefit the industry thereby as well.
Georg, thank you. Wanda.
Actually, I think that some of you have heard a few months ago Fatih Birol saying that it's not the most crucial part who wins the marathon during the first mile, but it's super important who's gonna win the last mile. And the problem is that, for example, when it comes to solar installation, Europe was pretty good at the very beginning of this marathon, but lost the place throughout the whole race. This is the last moment, I would say, not the high time, but the last moment to react from the policymaker side to not lose also this race. And I'm very happy, and we do welcome wind package that has been announced, and we do support the whole comprehensive approach presented here by Dieter.
Thank you. Morten.
Well, to stay in the marathon analogy, I don't know if we even started this race, because my worry is that we don't see any final investment decisions out there. So clearly we're not in a good place, and Dieter described this very well. But talking to people in industry, I think I mean these are really challenging times, and this has to be a wake-up call, because my worry is that if we do not get our act together in this, then in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, I mean, the industry is going to look completely different, if at all, in Europe. So sorry for being quite alarmist, but I think these are really worrying times for the industry.
Well, that's nice. So let's let's do a bit more detail then.
I gotta go now.
Thanks for your contribution. So basically, let's start with drill down a bit more on that. So the wind power package, the defining elements of that is what we set them out at the beginning. Where do you find yourself most optimistic? Where do you think we can win quickly and sustain those wins as well? Because I think this seems to be part of the concern. It's like, it's a good package, everybody's talking the right language, it's the right moment, but where can this be delivered quickly? Morten?
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for guidance on auction designs, for example, because you have member states all are struggling with coming up with right concepts or approaches. Is it the Dutch model? Is it whatever kind of approach do you need to take? So I see a big playing field for the Commission and smart people to come up with also specifics in terms of guidance on auction design and the qualitative criteria. I think we all would subscribe and adhere to this, but what is it at the end of the day? How do you do this? Also in a way that is transparent, because we couldn't and should not forget prices either, totally, right? It still has to be in there, in the package. So specific guidance or ideas or suggestions on how to improve this is important. And then at a top level as well, I mean, we have to have this discussion also with member states on negative bidding, that this is considered to be a cash cow for good reason. I used to be a spokesperson on finance affairs back in my country, and finance ministers all over Europe have a great appetite also, obviously, for revenue, and they should have. So we have to come up with smart models on this as well, in order to avoid what is happening in UK, in Germany, a lot of other places right now, which eventually leads to no final investment decisions being taken. So I think there's a lot to be said. And the package is extremely timely, auction design, and a wake-up call to finance ministries all over Europe on this negative bidding issue. That is important.
Thank you. Jump in.
Yeah, I think it needs to be extremely clear. Europe cannot afford to have any more failed auctions at all. We can't lose a gigawatt along the way. Yeah, when you look at the targets that national governments around the North Seas have committed themselves to by 2030, I mean, it's a pretty daunting task. Yeah, so. We all need to really be laser focused on having the right auction design, because uncapped negative bidding, as we've seen in Germany, or literally failed auctions like we've seen in the UK, simply cannot happen anymore, right? The beauty of the wind power package is that everything is immediately actionable. So it enhances, for example, the role of the European Investment Bank. Already now, the European Investment Bank can provide counter guarantees, to support the running of the industry. Already now, the European Investment Bank can start financing investments in manufacturing, which it wasn't doing until very, very recently. And permitting, I think we need to stay laser focused on that. That has been the main bottleneck until now. There are tools out there in order to automate, work together more effectively in a more transparent way to get these projects across the line. If everything comes together here, we can definitely deliver.
Okay, Wanda.
Well, there are so many actions that needs time to be that need time to be implemented. But there are also so many things that we can do. I mean, policymakers on the European and the national level can do now, and it will take no more than a few months. And I mean by that legislative changes, and average installation process takes less than 3 years when it comes to offshore wind farms, but formal process can exceed even 10 years, because it's a planning, it's a permitting process, a decision, and then tender procedures, and actually there are so many overburdens throughout this path that we could easily get rid of. Actually, I think that that this is long-hanging fruit to be picked. To shortening the whole administrative processes, the permitting that we started to talk about, but also, for example, my company, I only recently realized that it's not, we are not solely sole here, I mean standalone here, because we are private listed company that is state-owned as well. So we are operating under procurement law regime. So we are conducting tenders as an administration, according to administration public tenders regime, you know that, and it's extending process to enormously, and it's completely unnecessary. What we need here is to conducting tenders in a transparent and competitive way, but not as the administration does it, you know. So, for example, you know, bearing in mind that these are investments which are kind of a public purpose investments, well, we should probably get out of the procurement law regime. It would be very easy, and it would bring a lot of benefits, not only for, you know, Polish state-owned company, but other state-owned companies across European unions, because so many investors are state-owned companies, so they are operating under procurement law procedures.
Thank you. And an obvious point, well made. And Morten, I'm conscious of your time here, so I want to just move to the idea Ursula von der Leyen talks about the wind manufacturing being made in Europe, and how difficult that's going to be, and the competitive element that we have with the United States, in particular with the IRA elements. How do you see Europe succeeding or failing at this? And do you think these are nice words from Ursula von der Leyen, or is this a realistic proposition?
Well, so if you add up all the funding via recovery packages and what have you, I mean, we are at a European level. If you add all this up, we are matching and what the Americans are providing. Challenge obviously being the tax incentives and rebates. I mean, they are transparent, they're predictable, they work fast. It's all that we're not able to deliver from the European side that they do like this. So clearly we have to think and develop new ideas on governance issues, on funding issues. I think for the upcoming, for the next mandate, for the next commission to think along those lines in terms of your innovation fund, sovereignty fund, what have you, where you somehow align funding with the incentives to implement the directives and regulations that we already adopted. Because we lack implementation in so many areas. So I think it would be great to have, say, new ideas on somehow linking these funding mechanisms, developing new ones as well, but link it to the implementation of what we actually adopted already. If that were to happen, then I could see a positive narrative rather than where we are right now, where you have a lot of skepticism on some of the green and energy issues that we're debating in Parliament or in Europe at large, with EU is coming and imposing bad stuff on member states, right? So I think in order to develop a positive narrative, this could be an important feature of also the upcoming election campaigns. I mean, let the political groups and parties compete on also positive narratives on how to maintain clean tech industry production in Europe, because we need it for climate objectives, obviously, but also in terms of job creation.
Okay, just finally on that for you, you've got China in the mix here as well, and the subsidies that apply there. But the United States also has an issue. It has an election next year. The possibility, perhaps increasing possibility, that a Trump administration would return, which would not be climate friendly, which would not be supportive of this industry, which would almost certainly roll back IRA as well. Do you think that in that context, Europe looks like a better investment field because it's more stable? Slower, yes, but more stable. Morten.
Big question. I don't see the IRA is not going to be rolled back, because it benefits a lot of also Republican-leaning states. So I don't see this being rolled back, but this is speculative. I would love to see Europe being that competitive that investors would flock to Europe in order to develop further. But so clearly this has to be the ambition, a common ambition of this. And part of this is obviously also to protect critical industries and consider this clean tech industry with offshore and onshore wind being a vital part of this, to consider this to be of overriding public interest. So this we clearly have to push for.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming in. I know you have to run off now as well, so thank you for that. And let me bring the question to you and then to Pierre. The same context, can we do this in Europe? Do we have the capacity? Do we have the reserve to do this now? Or is this made in Europe a wish list for the future? How does the Belgian government see this?
I think, to be honest, now is the time that we can still keep the business in Europe and not see it go away like we did with solar. So I fully support it, and we do have a role, I think, also from member state side, but also from European side to get actions. And I think the wind power package is certainly a very good step, keeping the information here, keeping the data here, so that also innovation is being pushed forward in Europe. Of course, I think also coming to the next European presidency, we do need to look forward in terms of more long-term planning to make sure that this production stays here. Also providing for the necessary market to do so, and tender criteria is, I think, also one of the major steps that we can bring as governments, but also the regulatory framework. And I would also like to come back to the fact that indeed we cannot afford any tenders being missed, because we do see inflation costs rising, we do see financing costs rising. At the other hand, we had an evolution of a lot of member states into the negative bidding. And of course, we do need to have the capacity installed at a certain moment, which was also one of the reasons why in Belgium we did decide for a two-sided CFD to give the investment security, so that we can really assure the investment being installed. Which I think will be an attention point for a lot of member states within Europe to keep the promises that we also made in the recent Oslo declaration as well, to go to the 300 gigawatts of offshore wind in the North Sea. And yes, perhaps negative bidding, I'm not very fond of neither. It has other consequences. Of course, we do need to make sure that the potential of offshore wind is not necessarily in those countries where the real demand is in terms of the industry or in terms of the electricity demand. So we really need to make sure that there is an incentive for those countries to install the full potential in the benefit of Europe, having the grids as a first initiative, making sure the grids are there that are financed by Europe, because also in the member states we will have lines crossing the countries. And it's difficult to get permits also for your own electricity lines, let alone for other member states. So we need to find a European answer to this.
Okay, very clear. Pierre, and then Wanda.
I just wanted to come back to this point that Morten was making on the EU versus the US IRA, and what we're doing here in Europe. It's true, there's a lot of funding and financing in Europe. It's just very hard for entrepreneurs to actually access them and to operationalize that. So there needs to be a clear focus on making this accessible and result-oriented going forward. And that will certainly help the narrative for the European elections. It's about, delivering for Europeans. That needs to be the sole focus. On European manufacturing, there's that angle, of course, supporting the supply chain. But also if we have the market at the right scale, 30 gigawatt per year, then of course Europeans will be able to invest in the supply chain and to deliver. That's very clear. What's very important, and Dita explained this extremely well, is that there's more to it than jobs. Jobs are incredibly important. They're a part of the license to operate for the wind sector, creating an opportunity for Europeans. But there's also a security angle here, right? We bring in Chinese technology connected to the grids, we expose ourselves to more vulnerabilities. The last thing that we want is to replace our dependence on Russian fossil fuels with the dependence on Chinese technology. And so this is exactly the right moment to walk the tightrope and to make sure that happens as we go through this challenging periods but manageable periods to 2030.
Thank you. Wanda.
I need to refer to that actually, because I'm really less optimistic when it comes to implementing new requirements, when it comes to the security. Last 2 years I was observing how cyber security requirements were being negotiated and ultimately pulled to the to 5G auction for frequencies in Poland. It took us 3 years. to like set the bunch of requirements which were applicable and which were first sufficient, but also applicable by the market. So, actually, I do welcome what was in the package in terms of cybersecurity requirements, but we need to bear in mind that it will take a long time to come up with a clear solution, because now there is like an approach, right? We need to take care of this one. But now we need to work on details, and that will take time. What I wanted to point out, so I'm concerned that it's another slowdown that will result in slowing down the whole processes. But of course, that is also necessary, and we are all aware of that. But what I also wanted to point out that to meet 2030 target, wind target set by 135 governments across the world, actually we would have to build in 2029 over 66 gigawatts of new installed offshore capacities, and in 2030 additional 70. These are the data that I got from Wood Mackenzie. And just to put you in a picture, like between 2015 and 2021, annually, there was an increase of 3 gigawatts in offshore wind farms. So you can see that there is enormous effort, not only on the side of the investor, but also on the supplier side, who reported, as Dita mentioned already, who recently are reporting losses. So the question mark is whether they will be able to cover our demand, because we are competing strongly between investors, between ourselves, because the demand is huge. So the prices are increasing not only because of the interest rates and not only because of the inflation, and but because the demand is skyrocketing, and the suppliers not able to cover it and will not able to cover. So the question is whether we will be able to deliver 2030 target when it comes to offshore.
Okay, thank you. Anne wants to respond, then Georg, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I actually shared the concern in terms of is the supply chain ready to deliver? So I think it is also useful that we do discuss in terms of standardization, if that would be a way forward. Of course, taking into consideration that innovation also still needs to happen, but somehow giving a view to the supply chain that there are these projects, there are certain limits, frameworks that they will work in, so that they can actually invest in new production capacities that will make money in the end, because the innovation went too fast. There's also a lot of costs, children's diseases that they have suffered, which we need to benefit now from a maturing technology. So I would say it's a call to industry, perhaps, who is best served to determine these boundaries. We are more than willing to cooperate, also in view of the next presidency, to see if we can do something for standardization to move that forward.
Okay, thank you. Georg, I wanted to ask you just on the auctions as well, in the context of Made in Europe. Do you see the redesign of the auctions process as a soft form of protectionism, where the qualitative elements are really designed to keep out lower cost bidders, lower cost quality, and competitively disadvantage China, for example?
What a suggestive question. No, but I mean, as the question suggests, indeed there's a significant risk here. And I mean, if you read the package document, if you hear the Director General, I mean, kind of emanates from that there is an element of keeping somebody out of the market, and if it's done for good reasons and for very clearly defined reasons, then we can discuss. But we need to be very careful that we not create a bureaucratic monster with the whole thing, that we really get out of the deployment, that we are then getting the value that wind has. So not kind of, again, the terawatt hour as such is not the value. The value is getting the terawatt hour that somebody can really consume. And what I would like to highlight in that is the Europeanization of those standards. And maybe the good part of that is that if we are discussing that now here in Brussels, it's it's much better than if member states start to discussing that and that the market fragments. So maybe we are in a second best world, but the risk would be a third best world, and therefore we should try to make that happen. And maybe one point coming back to what Anne said, because I think it's the crucial thing. I mean, it's the value of the internal market. With wind is very location specific, and not everybody has good wind sites, and but everybody would like to benefit and can benefit from the value that wind can provide. So we need the grids, and we need the market tools on a European level. We need this Europeanization in order to let this promise really arrive, and then you come on the auction design side a bit away from purely thinking about the pre-qualification, but also about kind of what is essentially the cash flows that are promised in those auctions. And here, should we really cut with CFDs all the revenues when wind produces, when electricity is scarce? Does that not encourage wind production in places that might not be optimal? Okay. How can we ensure that really our market design is geared to extract most of the value from wind, to be able to produce at the right location where the demand is, at the right time when the demand is, and again, not only focus on the terawatt hour.
Okay, Pierre, and then Anne.
Well, if Anne wants to respond specifically to that, yeah, I defer.
Very generous.
Yes, just because I don't fully agree in the fact that we will need offshore wind or wind and solar in general. I'm not. I don't think we will have in the situation that we will have too much. Basically, in the end, in terawatt hours, we will need everything. And I think there's other solutions, preferably in terms of flexibility, in terms of storage, demand side management, other capabilities that we need to develop to solve that problem, rather than slowing down the installation rate, because that we will need for the security of supply. So I would consider it a bit from a different perspective, other than the fact I fully agree that this European grid, that's really the way to go, to also have the energy efficiency for Europe in mind, and also landlocked countries, or countries with less potential of wind should also benefit from electrification, from energy savings, which otherwise would be driven towards hydrogen, for example, not necessarily in those applications that would be in the best interest of Europe. So really a Europe question.
Go ahead.
No, a short reply.
Pierre, get his turn, don't worry.
I agree, but we need to have a clear visibility on this complementary system before, because otherwise the players that are going to invest would not be sure that they are getting their money out of those investments. If they don't know that there is enough storage and enough grid being made available, then they are not going to invest, because the cash flows are looking very bad if all the wind in the North Sea starts to just cannibalize itself. So, and for that we need more European planning, and the NECP process currently is not working well. We need something to be sure that we can, between member states, coordinate on network development and generation development, so that the investors have some clarity on what complementary system is in place to assess whether what they are going to produce, wind in a very specific profile, is having value or not.
Yeah.
You're getting at the issue of the stewardship of the energy system and how we plan the electricity grid. Right now, you know, the grid planning system is broken. It's not long term. It's not super joined up, and it needs to be revised fundamentally as part of the next mandate. The boundary conditions are that if you want to go to net zero, you need to double in size the electricity system, and you need the electricity grids to go along with that. And we need to be making the investments already now in order to make that work. In that context, every gigawatt of offshore wind that we can get online today, we should take it. Yeah, because we're going to need a lot of decarbonized electricity in order to make that whole construct work. I just want to come back to your earlier question about pre-qualification and non-price criteria. The pre-qualification criteria and the non-price criteria will be completely transparent and non-discriminatory. Yeah, if international competitors can't be bothered to make the necessary investments to meet, you know, cybersecurity or sustainability requirements, so be it. Yeah. We as Europeans do that already. It's only fair to be recognized for it.
Very fine. I was with President Biden when he announced our package, and he has no shame about saying America first. It is unabashedly we don't care what else you do, we will do this, and it'll be our money, and our economy will benefit from it. And it strikes me that we're a little shy about saying that about Europe still, and that this messaging will probably get buried somewhere during the course of the election as well. Let's take some questions. Unless you want to reply to any of this?
Yes, I need to.
I thought you
I
might.
cannot resist the temptation, actually, because, I feel that to some extent this discussion is a little bit abstract, because you are talking about the system, revising the system, while at the same time there are very daily struggle that the companies have. And what I mean by that, for example, when it comes to the grids, guys, if you want to revise the system, first the grids need to be there, and it's super difficult for us, for example, to buy to buy components to adjust the grid, to modernize the grid, to build new one. It's like it's an enormous struggle that I don't think that. I mean, that our listeners and all of the policymakers are fully aware of. For example, I remember there was a time, a year ago or a little bit around it, that when Ukrainians, because my company owns 40% of distribution network in Poland, and this is the east part of Poland, so we cooperate strongly with Ukrainians, and that was the moment when their infrastructure was under a huge attack, energy infrastructure, and they were begging us to provide them some transformers, and we were like, we have none. We have none. It's impossible to buy. It's impossible to buy, So we need to wait. And every time we get one, we are able to successfully buy some new devices, new products. We already know where to install them, and we know what to do with those that were there previously. Where to move them. So. Actually, I'm still underlying and stressing the fact that we have to, before we or maybe parallelly to revising the system, we need to take care of the components manufacturing here in Europe. We need to provide subsidies to bring it here, to build these capacities, because, as I said, demand will be huge. Demand is already huge. And, we can all take advantage from this, because when there is a manufacturing, when there are components from Europe, this kind of local content, everyone taking advantage from it, new job places, shipping industry benefiting from it, for example, when it comes to offshore. Just these are the organic issues that have to be tackled. Otherwise, we can just discuss about revising the system, but still. For example, the grids will be impossible to connect to the grid, because we will not be able to build a new part of the network. So these are the most fundamental things to be taken care of. Yeah.
But you would agree that if you don't start the process, both sides of this now, then it takes too long to bring the manufacturing capacity on for both. So you need all those dimensions moving forward right now.
Yes, of course, there is no need to wait, right?
Okay, let's take some questions. So Irina Kostova from SEPS, with all the challenges lying ahead for the wind industry, how do you view the prospects of offshore wind in lower wind speed areas, for example, the Black Sea and Mediterranean, both in terms of the business case and the advancement of Class 2 and Class 3 bottom fixed floating technologies? Who wants to have a go at that? Pierre?
Yeah, I mean, floating is clearly going to play a very significant role. Historically, we've seen a lot of developments around the North Sea, in the Baltic, but offshore wind is going to be a pan-European story, and if you want to reap the benefits of wind in the Mediterranean with deeper waters, then floating is going to play a key role there. Again, we need to see the same development that we've seen for floating as we've seen for bottom fixed. That requires, big signals, big investment signals from governments with, pilot auctions. We're starting to see them in France and elsewhere, and so we're at an important pivot moment here for floating.
Thank you. Anyone else on this? Excellent. Okay, next question is from Anna. Anna says, there's a growing discontent among some Europeans regarding wind power investments in their close neighbourhood. Fast and massive deployment will only make this problem bigger. What is your strategy to address public opposition against the wind investments? I think this gets to permitting as well.
But you mean public opposition, which is like
public opposition.
Society opposition, or?
I would say, I would understand that in terms of planning applications for permitting. It would come to that, would it not be?
Well, that's actually, you see, when it comes to this legislative gorsay, we are in charge. I mean, Europe is in charge. National policymakers are in charge. They can easily get rid of any excessive burdens and bureaucracy burdens. I can tell you from our perspective that we have one project, offshore wind farms, which is constrained by EIA decision. And for example, we cannot enhance effectiveness of this project because of constraints of EIA decision. Well, we could revise EIA decision, but it would, take time, a lot of time, and it will take a huge risk also. So, why we cannot take care of this kind of things, to be tackled, and then effectiveness of the project will be better. And
thank you so much.
That's an important part of the equation, of course, and the other thing is developers, know it's part of their DNA that they need to engage the community early, be extremely transparent, involve them, and help co-develop the project. And that's how you address it. That's how you bring, the general popularity of renewables, 70%, 80%, depending on the country, to the local level. Another important point to keep in mind is that the number of turbines is not linear, right? With the gigawatts, you repower projects, which are often in the best wind sites. You actually have fewer turbines than before, and you make more electricity as a result, right? So it's a dynamic development, but clearly engaging people to people is critical here.
Because now I realize that I haven't responded to the question directly. I didn't get that, honestly speaking. But I can tell you from our experience that, for example, in Poland, we can see a huge opposition against renewables installation. We can still see when it comes to nuclear. Yeah. But for example, when it comes to renewables, slightly to be seen, So I think that it's in Poland at least it's not an issue.
Okay, Anne?
I think it is an issue within Europe, and I think also specifically in Belgium we are very densely populated, so every turbine will pose issues, every overhead line, every reinforcement of the grid will have its issues. But of course it's still important to get everybody on board in the energy transition and explain very well why it is needed also for their own security of supply, for other reasons. So we do need to get them on board. And it is actually one of the reasons why in the Belgian tender we have focused on citizen participation, trying to include this renewable energy company, renewable energy communities, which the European Commission has launched as idea, trying to get that integrated in the offshore wind projects, trying to really put that forward as an added value, as a local added value. And what we hope it will succeed.
Thank you. Jörg.
Yeah, maybe one thought on that is kind of the sharing of the value of the kind of decide in the end. And here we are back also to this negative auction prices. I mean, there is a big question. If you have a good site and you put a wind turbine there, you're going to potentially make a lot of money out of that. And the question is, who is going to get that? Is that going to the landowner? Is that going to the state through a negative auction price? Is that going to the commune? And potentially that is a very hard to resolve question, because it's very dynamic. In one location you're getting kind of a high value, in another location you're getting very different values from that. Maybe taxation rules and redistribution is better, but I think it's a crucial element for the longer term development.
Yeah, Anders.
An easy solution, renewable energy communities. It exists. You just need to implement it. So there is a solution available.
Yeah, just to be on the record, I know you're not saying that, but uncapped negative bidding is not the solution for value sharing. Yeah, so it's not the solution because it presses the supply chain, which is struggling, and those costs need to be passed on to somebody, right? So yes, we need to continue being creative in the solutions that we find on value sharing. But uncapped negative bidding, which results in projects not being made, well, there are no electrons, there are no revenues, there's nothing to share. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is from Sabine Sluters and said, today it was announced that Siemens Energy needs state warranties to secure the capital it needs and to fulfill its order book. The German government decided to help the company with a warranty of 7.5 billion euros. You state it's all about action. Now, how does the European Wind Action Plan help this case? Georg, you smiled most.
No, I mean it's a super challenging question because it kind of goes to the heart of industrial policy. And do we help the incumbent? Is it the right thing to bail somebody out that did some clear business and management mistakes? And what signals does that provide for the future? What does it tell to the competitors that might have done better? So I think for the ministry in Berlin, it was probably a very, very hard discussion and a decision to be taken. I understand that in the bigger picture of things, it seems to be the right way, but let's see whether it's going to be challenged in Brussels and what will come out.
Thank you. Pierre?
The wind power package is about creating the right conditions in the medium term for all those companies to succeed. At the end of the day, our wind turbine manufacturers are the crown jewels, of the Green Deal. We need to make sure that they're in a position to succeed in this challenging periods so that we deliver on our climate and energy security objectives.
Thank you. Anyone else in this?
Well, I do understand this approach actually to support companies and to support industry. Without this kind of support, it will be impossible to carry so many projects. For example, our offshore wind farms, if they were not covered by the CFDs, there will be it would be impossible to have them. So it's I think we are getting into the times where there will be so many subsidies and public guarantees needed on the market.
Sure.
A side note, I mean, the challenge is a bit, if you look into the cost of the transition, the investment-related cost, you're easily ending up with 2 or more percentage point of GDP.
Okay.
The question is, should that all be underwritten by the state, or is that to the private sector? And I mean, the decision in Europe is we leave it largely to the private sector, but we need to make sure that that we find this. Have a clearly defined boundary, because otherwise there is a slippery slope.
Gerke, when you think that you say this is a difficult decision clearly for Berlin to make, is that not a vote of confidence in the sector itself that they're prepared to make that decision to underwrite it? I would have to ask the colleagues in Berlin what they think about that. But I mean, if there were a vote of full confidence, then the state guarantees would not have been needed. But I know too little about the concrete case to really. Fair enough. Thomas Hugin, what role is foreseen for offshore hydrogen production and pipelines to help alleviate grid congestion for offshore wind producers? It's a bit off tangent, but we'll take it. Any comments on that? Anne?
Well,
sorry, go.
No, I can take this one. Of course, there will be a surplus of energy from the offshore, so we will analyzing right now the project to convert it to hydrogen, but it's not very effective for now. So we will continue to scrutinize, but we will need to take care of this issue. Otherwise, we will contribute to lowering spot prices, make them even negative.
Okay.
So we need to make it effective. Use it effectively.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think also hydrogen will be part of the solution. We just need to be careful that it's not an excuse because we can't seem to have the grid installed. We need to have the grid installed. There's no excuse for it. And then hydrogen is for sure playing its role, but not instead of the other.
Okay, just wanted to maybe take this as a follow-up to our discussion earlier on the European market. Aren't you afraid, Anna says, that the potential protectionist measures, use the word protectionist clearly there, Georg, you see that, and made in Europe policies would result in higher prices for European wind turbines and components, at least in the short to medium term, given the interlinked nature of the global wind supply chains? So basically, Europe's going to have to pay more because we're being protectionist about this whole thing. Is that fair?
It's not fair because it's not protectionist.
Fair enough. Okay, and
I would just
go ahead.
respond. I think as long as we value an added value,
Yeah.
then there's no protectionism involved. Others are free to follow. So I think you made your point very clear, and I would support.
Very well. And Sabine, so last question. So please send more questions. We'll do another round of questions, just a few minutes. The focus is on the targets for building a GW of wind farms, but it's still a market. Offshore wind also very much needs a concrete and steady growth in demand for green electrons and green molecules, hydrogen. How will the EU wind package see to this growth in concrete demand? So how is the package going to stimulate demand?
I mean, the package needs to be, I think, seen in a broader set of policies. The package is really targeted, you know, at a specific challenge at a specific moment. At the same time, and Dita explained this extremely well, you have other you have legislation in place, such as the Renewable Energy Directive, which has very specific targets, for example, for renewable hydrogen, which has very specific targets for decarbonizing transport with renewable electricity. So that needs to go in tandem, but of course the legislation needs to be implemented. That's the key.
And
I think at most of the industries that we see, there's no lack of demand. They really want to green. And I would say in terms of the electricity market design, also the fact that we want to stimulate much more the PPA, the use of PPAs, getting the industry to have direct access to the renewable electricity, which is also something we try to implement in our tender design in Belgium to get that access towards PPAs, is one of the ways to get them connected in a direct manner.
We've kind of skimmed across this, but I want to do a little bit more detail on fast-track permitting as well. So this is clearly one of the 6 elements that the wind package is looking at. How do you see fast-track permitting accelerating this process?
Hugely.
Why?
Why? Because it's the longest process in the whole process. I mean, permitting is like is the slowest process that we are, you know, also the tenders that I mentioned already, but permitting also, and the fact that we are conducting these processes, you know, as a waterfall, you know, like IT projects, you know, step by step, and the constraints from the previous steps are, you know, limiting us in the future. So making this faster and more flexible, at the same time more predictable, is the key to the success, for sure.
Thank you. Pierre?
We've been talking a lot about offshore wind, but their onshore wind is going to have a key role to play here. And let's keep in mind that a lot of the permitting processes across Europe are still heavily paper-based. We had one of our board members tell us a few months ago, I just had to sign off a purchase order for 40,000 euros in printing costs because we had to, you know, print dozens and dozens of copies of our permit application for the local authorities. So you can imagine this guy in a wheelbarrow, you know, wheeling paper around to go to the permitting authorities. This is unfit for 2023. It's unfit for the challenge of, you know, of decarbonization. There are solutions. We have been working Wind Europe with Amazon Web Services, Accenture, to develop a permitting tool that basically takes all of this online.
It's the Permitting Prime, right?
Sorry?
Permitting Prime.
Permitting Prime, that's a good name for it. We call it Easy Permits, and we're very hopeful that with the support of the European Commission, national governments and permitting authorities can pick this up and actually implement this very quickly. It could be a game changer, in the process.
How does AI layer in with that, if that's not too far ahead? Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely going to, so I don't know, the degree to which AI is already embedded in the project, but it's a platform that you can bolt things onto. And clearly, the community engagement is also covered in that context, and artificial intelligence will play a role there, so that you can visit a virtual wind farm, see how it's going to impact your surroundings, and that makes it much easier to embrace a project if you see, okay, well, I thought there would be, a flicker effect. I thought it would be this noisy or what have you. But actually, I've experienced this. I kind of enjoyed it. It's cool. I'm going to show my friends when they visit. Again, a game changer.
Thank you. Georg?
Maybe switching from AI a bit to data.
Sure.
I mean, for me, if you want to build an industry or recreate an industry, you need long-term predictability of demand. And energy policy is something that is very, very volatile over the past years, and we need to somehow give guidance. We don't want state planning that decides today what the power system in 2050 should look like. We want markets to do that. But we need some vision on the direction of travel, and we need to have very sophisticated discussions on how the different pieces of the puzzle fit to each other, because it's complicated. I mean, you need to have, in certain hours, you want to have electricity, and the wind and the sun is not there, and the storage, and what have you. So I would very much call for really stepping up on the data modeling, monitoring side on a European level, that we need some sort of agency that collects that, because that is increasing the level of the debate, the quality level, and that helps us to provide much clearer guidance to industry that this is really within the room of scenarios that are currently thinkable. And then industry understands, okay, well, that's maybe not the defined plan that we are having, but that's essentially the direction of travel towards which we are working, which is certainly much better than just going for all individual CFD auctions that happen every 6 months or so, and hoping from auction to auction that again there is going to be volume, because industry needs to know what is in 7 or 10 years and not what is in 6 to 12 months.
Okay, anyone else on this? Let's go to competitiveness. What are the main obstacles to competitiveness? I know we're touching some of these at the moment, but if you were to say that's the problem, what do we deal with, and which the wind package addresses?
I mean, it's all of the above, right? If you have the markets, if you have the visibility, the players will be competitive. They will adjust to the market signals. One thing that we haven't discussed much, but which is going to be crucial in the medium term, is going to be attracting new people to the industry.
Okay.
Yeah, Dieter talked about younger people, but it's not only younger people. It's also people coming from other industries, potentially sunset industries, to work in the wind industry. We assess that we need 200,000 more people to join the wind industry in the next 8 years, and so we have to be extremely proactive in engaging them.
Anne?
I just want to make one statement that we are competitive now. Also in Belgium we have 2 of the largest worldwide installation companies at the top of their business. So we do have the competitors now. It's in order to keep them, but I just want to have a positive note that we are having very good businesses.
Great. Baltic Sea. So you want to.
Competitiveness is something that you need to fight for every minute and every year. It's not something that you lock in as a status quo. So, and what Europe is strong at is high-skilled staff, capital-intensive things, innovative things, and we should not lock ourselves into a chasse gardée that is protected. But we need to see the future value of wind coming more from lower wind speeds in some region, being more granular, being better manageable. I mean, there's a lot of value in smartening this stuff up that we in Europe can develop better than others, and we should not trying to become a sclerotic system of just producing massive amounts of 90 or 2010 wind turbines, but look ahead. And here I think the wind package had relatively little talked about innovation, which I found a bit of a missed opportunity.
Wanda, why do you think there's some little talk of innovation then?
Why there is some? I think because R&Ds, are first of all difficult, and you have to be very very persistent to when you are focusing on innovation, because it takes time. It takes a lot of time to come up with something which is valuable, and it's so easy to give up, you know. So there is this. I observed that on our national level, that, you know, after 5 years of some R&D studies, you know, the team hasn't come up with some bright idea. So, you know, it was wasted money. You know, this natural response to that was, you know, we just wasted money. And so I think this, like, this is the main issue. We need to be aware that it will take a lot of time and it will take a lot of money. And, you know, some of these money will be wasted, you know, but at the same time, the people will learn a lot. So eventually they will come up with some. Yes, but also, please, one comment about this competitiveness, because, you know, I find that last years on a European level were mostly covered by ideological debate over, you know, becoming green, being super ambitious, and how to achieve these super ambitious targets, and how to accelerate achieving them. At the same time, there were other states, I mean China, that were taking advantage of Europe and, you know, pushing their production, putting their production here, selling us their components, and, you know, so this is the moment of truth that we need to say it out loud, and honestly, you know, do anything to not in a 20-30 years wake up in a green Europe, but completely broke, with our citizens' money transferred to United States, to China, and completely dependent from different economies.
Green but broke is a great slogan for next year's election. That's excellent. Pierre.
Yeah, that sounds pretty dystopian. We should try to avoid that. Yeah. Now, I just want to make the obvious point that the wind industry is incredibly innovative. Yeah. So if you look at offshore winds, 2022, the turbines installed were on average 8 megawatts. The turbines ordered were on average 12 megawatts. 2023, the turbines ordered are 15 megawatts. These are enormous machines. We're constantly, you know, testing the limits of physics here. Yeah. So that's one thing. The other thing, wind power package has innovation. There's 4 billion in the EU Innovation Fund for clean tech manufacturing. The call is starting now, and it's also an opportunity for the wind sector.
Okay, just we're going to take a couple of questions, then we're going to wrap up in a few minutes. We've got 10 minutes left. Baltic Sea, offshore Baltic Sea, what's the capacity? What's needed to get the investment there? Wanda.
Well, you know, Polish Energy Group already has like more than 7 gigawatts in seabed permits, and I mean the total capacity of Baltic Sea falling on Poland is around 12 gigawatts, but at the same time there are assessments, AI by the way, that the potential is much...
if somebody wants to run that through ChatGPT just there now, we can get you another answer.
Is much bigger. So what do we need? I think that it has been already mentioned during the whole discussion, you know. First, we need suppliers that will cover our demand. Secondly, we need to have an access to financing. We need to have our projects bankable, which current ones that we are already implementing together with Ørsted are, because they are covered with the CFD. So it was like, you know, also I need to express kind of gratitude toward our government, because usually across the Europe, governments are pretty reluctant to see that there is a need to increase the state aid, but our CFDs, thanks to legislative changes at the beginning of this year, are indexed for inflation, and also government took a currency risk in this project. So, you know, it was extremely helpful to put these business cases together, and so we are not in such a bad position as other investors across Europe. But I think it's necessary also to be recognized by other governments. So, having this kind of support for another phase, not only for those projects, those 3 gigawatts that we are ongoing under the that are under ongoing investment, but for the second part, these 4 that we've been only recently granted, would be necessary. But like without this, it's impossible it will be impossible to deliver. But through the auctions and new requirements.
Anyone else on Baltic?
And the economically viable potential of the Baltic is very significant. It's more than 90 gigawatts. Shallow waters, strong winds. Let's go get it.
Very well. Anne?
And I would say not only looking from the local demand, but looking towards Europe, getting the grids, getting that interconnected to the rest of Europe, and having Europe helping to actually manage the full potential is one of the critical points we want to drive forward in our presidency.
Thank you. Question from Adrian. A question about an elephant in the room, which is critical raw materials that are needed to manufacture technologies and deploy more wind power. Supply chains are already congested. Any ideas on how to avoid problems here? Who wants to slay the elephant?
It's really hard to slay the elephant, but just to note that I think the Critical Raw Materials Act is really tackling all the right dimensions.
Okay.
Right? So friendshoring, diversification of imports, circularity, making sure that we make the best use of our resources, and let's have an honest debate about what is required to mine in Europe in a sustainable and socially acceptable way.
Do we have the necessary materials in Europe to mine at the scale that's needed?
So there's a lot out there, yeah. So if you look at the impact assessments of the CRMA, it's there. It's more of a question of, okay, what kind of decisions do we make as a society? Do we want to be mining in Europe, or do we want to be developing the international partnerships that make us that don't help us decouple, but de-risk our supplies?
Okay.
How environmentally friendly are is excavating raw materials. I mean, environmentally friendly. I say, ironically.
But then some of our competitors are even less environmentally friendly as well.
Yeah,
so we have more control over that element. Any other final questions to send us straight through right now? We're going to wrap up in a moment. The auction systems, the permitting we've covered. The supply chain, the wind supply chain is also stretched, and Ursula von der Leyen talked about the challenges that you're facing as well. But we've got inflation, all these elements, the cost of energy, all these elements feed into this process as well. Are we looking too much at high level and ignoring some of the economic realities that are on the table right now? Is that going to slow the process? Is that going to become the bottleneck if we don't get a grip on inflation and energy pricing as well?
I think the rate of inflation right now in Belgium is around 1.5%.
Okay.
So.
But that's not universal.
No. But what I'm saying is that we shouldn't necessarily look at the the macroeconomic picture of today as necessarily being. We're in a tight spot economically. Yeah. That's very clear. Post-COVID recovery has been very messy. Yeah. But let's lay the groundwork and the foundations for the sector to be able to thrive. Yeah. And by indexing auctions, by factoring in the economic realities in our policies, we can do this.
So trust the process.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do our wrap up. 30 seconds or so for each of you. Your final sound bites as well. Anne, you want to kick off again? Your takeaway for today.
Yeah, I wasn't fully prepared to take. No, but for me it's important. I think the wind package is really a good first step. It really calls for action now. It puts the pressure on the issues that we do need to tackle together. And I would say let's continue these discussions because it's not done yet. There are still this long-term plans that we need to make. There's this cost-sharing CBAs. There's a lot of details to still work out and trying to get that on track on a long-term basis to really save the industry, to really come to the energy security of supply that we need currently in a European context. I would say is for me the most important point coming also towards the presidency.
Thank you, Pierre.
What I hear is, as a representative of a national government, a developer, a representative of the whole value chain, and an economist, basically agreeing on the big picture on the road of travel, right? And so let's do it. Let's enshrine this in this wind charter that Dieter Juhl-Jorgensen talked about, and roll out all these actions.
Thank you. Georg?
Yeah, a bit of a generic Brussels statement, but I think we really...
We do love them.
Yeah, so probably your editor crosses them out typically. No, but the point would be that we really need a functioning internal market that is very, very competitive internally and also externally, to make sure that we have the weight here, that market participants have the visibility, and that we are not kind of fragmenting the system again into 27 small bits, both on the electricity market as well as on the wind technology provider market side. So there is, I think, a significant risk here, and keeping that together will be crucial to meet the extremely high ambition that we also have for wind deployment.
Thank you. Last word, Wanda.
Well, I think that this is a very good starting point, actually, that we are right now in. That the administration and policymakers became fully aware of what's going on here, of the other actors in this room taking advantage from us. So, as the awareness is the first step to everything, we are already on a path. But what we need a strong cooperation between administration, policymakers, and the industry, and a lot of understanding and support that is needed, and also a lot of money.
Bring the cash. Thank you to our panel, and to Dieter also for her speech earlier. I really appreciate it. It was a good discussion. Thanks also to our audience for the participation and patience today. Thanks to PGE for supporting the program today as well. You don't see them, but they're here right behind me. Our team from Euractiv, Zoran, Pablo Wilson on the production, and with Tamara, who's the organizer today, as well with Anna, Shifra, and Sebastian, and some of the other team as well. So our thanks to them. The wind is behind us. The good ship Europe can catch that wind in its sails. The future is bright. The foundations have been laid. Now we just need to put the cash on the table. Have a good afternoon.